Agus ceann córa éon tímla na caintóirí níos luaithe agus bhí a géisteach leis an díospóir tústaire. Éon tíam gur rud compléiseach é seo, ach ag an am céine éon tíam gur rún faoi tá sé an háchtach agus éon tíam leis an I suppose an béim atá caintóirí eile tar éis chur ar an tácht sin, agus is rud anmh le feiscin tiste an sog bhfuil beagnach gachtain ag géin tú marall ar an principle agus marall ar an mille seo. So ceann córa, I welcome that this legislation is finally making its way through the houses. It's much needed and long awaited, and for the first time will regulate all forms of assisted human reproduction, including IVF, embryo screening and surrogacy. It has been 5 years now since legislation began to be drafted, and more than 15 years since the Commission on Assisted Human Reproduction called for new laws in this area. I agree with Minister Donnelly's comments on putting this before Cabinet recently, that this legislation will finally ensure assisted human reproduction practices and other related areas are conducted in a consistent and standardised way, and very importantly with necessary oversight. The new legislation will provide for new assisted human reproduction regulatory authority, which will be responsible for regulatory treatments, licensing and regulating surrogacy, pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, embryo screening procedures, posthumous assisted human reproduction, where pregnancy is achieved using the gametes of a deceased person. This new regulatory authority will be crucial in providing appropriate clinical care and ensuring appropriate clinical practices in the state for the first time. But most importantly, children born as a result of assisted human reproduction will be at the centre of the process. This legislation will assist thousands of people who wish to have children through AHR and will finally provide legal clarity for families at the centre of it. The one area of real concern I do see here is that by the Department of Health's own admission, the new legislation focuses entirely on this jurisdiction and doesn't necessarily address international surrogacy. In this respect, I welcome the establishment of a special Oireachtas committee which will examine further issues like these and this legislation as this legislation continues to progress through the Dáil. I understand that they will make their recommendations within 3 months. My other main concern with this legislation is that I'm not sure it makes domestic surrogacy as attractive as commercial surrogacy in other jurisdictions. The legislation is definitely not more attractive to going abroad for surrogacy purposes, and in that respect, while I respect the motivations and the intent behind the bill to make things more accessible for prospective parents, I'm not sure it goes far enough in providing the necessary legal protections for those parents. I'd also appreciate, Minister, if in your closing comments you could make some comment in relation to some of the difficulties faced by returning parents and their children when they do return to Ireland after bringing home their new babies. Can you clarify what the situation is in relation to returning mothers and their entitlements around availing of maternity leave, for example? Will prospective parents be entitled to this type of leave? Finally, and in conclusion, I broadly welcome the legislation and the debate here tonight. I have been contacted by many parents over the last few years who face the heavy financial burden of undertaking assisted human reproduction, the mental consequences and stresses the entire process can cause, and the legal limbo that many people for so long found themselves in. I welcome the debate and this conversation as it is finally an attempt to do the right thing in what is a very complex area. Go Mágat.